Target * 8 to 10 minutes. Hook * he was running boxing aerobics classes in Las Vegas, teaching housewives how to throw jabs. 10 years later, he ran a $4 billion fighting empire. This is the most unlikely rise in sports business history. The most valuable combat sports company on earth was built by a guy who was teaching cardio kickboxing to casino housewives in Las Vegas. He had no business degree, no investors, no plan. He had anger, hustle, and a refusal to accept that fighting wasn't a real sport. This is the come-up of Dana White. The come-up, Dana White, from aerobics to empire. Dana Frederick White Jr. was born on July 28, 1969, in Manchester, Connecticut. His mother, June, was a nurse. His father was largely absent. The family moved to Las Vegas when Dana was young. He grew up in a tough neighborhood. He bounced between Las Vegas and Maine. He was a fighter from the start, literally. Boxing became his obsession. In the early 1990s, White was running a boxing aerobics class at the Las Vegas Hilton. 3 classes a day. Housewives, retirees, tourists. He taught them jabs and hooks and kept them moving. He wasn't a world-class boxer. He wasn't a trainer of champions. He was a guy with a whistle and a heavy bag making $15 an hour. But he was connected. He knew everyone in the fight game. He knew the boxing scene in Vegas inside and out. And he had an idea that wouldn't leave him alone: mixed martial arts. In 1992, White started managing boxers. He had a small stable of fighters and made a modest living. But boxing was corrupt, slow, and resistant to change. White saw the early UFC a brutal, no-holds-barred spectacle that was banned in most states. It was bleeding money. It had no rules, no weight classes, and no mainstream acceptance. Politicians called it human cockfighting. But White saw something nobody else did: a sport. In 2000, White heard that Semaphore Entertainment Group, the company that owned the UFC, was looking to sell. The UFC was losing millions. It was banned from pay-per-view. It had no sponsors, no athletic commission support, and a reputation as a barbaric spectacle. White called his childhood friends, Frank and Lorenzo Fertitta. The Fertitta brothers had built station casinos into a billion-dollar casino empire. They had money, connections, and a love of combat sports. White pitched them: buy the UFC. Give me a small ownership stake. I'll run it. The Fertittas bought the UFC in January 2001 for $2 million. $2 million. For the entire company. The brand. The fighters. Everything. Dana White was named president. He owned 9% of the company. And then the real work began. White spent the next decade doing 3 things. 1. Legitimize the sport ***. He worked with athletic commissions across the country to get MMA sanctioned. State by state. Meeting by meeting. One commission at a time. He lobbied. He argued. He showed up in suits and made the case that this was a real sport with real athletes and real rules. 2. Build the brand ***. He launched the Ultimate Fighter reality show in 2005. Spike TV took a chance on it. The first season finale, Forrest Griffin vs. Stephan Bonnar, was one of the most watched fights in combat sports history. It put the UFC on the map. 3. Make the fighters stars ***. White didn't just promote fights. He promoted personalities. Chuck Liddell. Tito Ortiz. Randy Couture. Anderson Silva. Georges St-Pierre. Ronda Rousey. Conor McGregor. He made people care about the fighters as people, not just athletes. But it wasn't all success. In 2004, the UFC was still losing money. The Fertittas had poured $40 million into the company with no return. White had to lay off 80% of his staff. He went to bed every night wondering if it was all over. After The Ultimate Fighter broke through in 2005, things accelerated fast. 2006, UFC 61, Ortiz vs. Shamrock, did over 700,000 pay-per-view buys. The UFC was becoming a cultural force. 2007, the UFC bought Pride Fighting Championships, their biggest competitor, and absorbed their roster. Now they had all the best fighters in the world. 2009, UFC 100 did 1.6 million pay-per-view buys. It was the biggest event in MMA history. 2011, the Fox deal. A 7-year, $700 million broadcast agreement that put the UFC on network television for the first time. 2012, Ronda Rousey became the first female UFC fighter. Women's MMA went from non-existent to mainstream. 2015, Conor McGregor vs. Jose Aldo, 13 seconds. The fastest knockout in UFC title history. McGregor became the biggest draw in combat sports. The UFC was printing money. Pay-per-view revenue, broadcast deals, sponsorships, merchandise, international expansion. Dana White had taken a $2 million gamble and turned it into a global empire. But the biggest come-up was still ahead. In July 2016, WMAMG, now Endeavor, bought the UFC for $4.025 billion. $4 billion. The Fertitta brothers had bought it for $2 million. Dana White had built it from aerobics classes and a dying spectacle. And now it was worth 2,000 times what they paid. White stayed on as president, owning a larger stake after the sale. He continued to run the company with the same intensity, the same anger, the same refusal to accept anything less than dominance. Under White, the UFC expanded to over 40 events per year. They built the Apex facility in Las Vegas. They signed broadcast deals worth billions. They launched into new markets: Abu Dhabi, Australia, Brazil, the UK. In 2023, the UFC merged with WWE to form TKO Group Holdings, a $21 billion combat sports and entertainment conglomerate. The aerobics instructor from the Las Vegas Hilton now runs the most valuable combat sports company in history. Dana White didn't invent mixed martial arts. He didn't fight in the cage. He didn't have an MBA from Harvard. What he had was conviction, the absolute, unshakable belief that fighting was a real sport, that people wanted to watch it, and that he was the person to make it happen. When everyone told him he was wrong, politicians, media, sponsors, even his own fighters, he kept going. He kept showing up. He kept selling. Conviction plus hustle plus refusal to quit equals empire. That was Dana White's come up. From aerobics instructor to $4 billion empire builder. And that's season 1 of the come up. Hit subscribe, season 2 is coming, and it's going to hit harder. The come up. Before they were legends, ***.